So we saw a lot of fear in the markets, primarily crypto this past week. And as of recording this on September 28th, markets are finally starting to recover a decent bit. And we have ETH back above 4,100 as of today. And I thought it would be the perfect timing to make this video as there's less fear in the markets. People are starting to gain confidence again going into October. And today we're going to be talking about one of my most recent findings, which has kind of been on my radar for a little while, but I've just taken the time out to, fully research it, fully discuss it, and now hopefully share some of my insights with you guys today. So, as you guys probably have been able to guess by the title, we're going to be talking about BMNR, standing for BitMiner Immersion Technology, led by Tom Lee. Finding out about BMNR, it's really intrigued me, and I feel like it is one of the most asymmetric bets you can currently place in the crypto landscape. And even though it's not necessarily a crypto token or coin, it is still an ETH leveraged bet in a sense. And we're going to get into all of that in just a second. But just to start off, if you guys aren't familiar with me, my name is Kush. I make primarily crypto content with a little bit of splash in a little bit of finance talk, a little bit of economics, and kind of talk about the macro landscape a little bit as well. So today we're going to be talking about BMNR, BitMiner Technology, which was previously a Bitcoin mining company. So they have since, as of I believe June, perhaps, or maybe even before that, they've transitioned to an ETH Treasury company. And so they're essentially following the playbook that Michael Saylor has set, has put on the forefront and kind of open people's eyes to the upside potential in these crypto digital asset treasuries / DATs that are coming out nowadays. And I'm going to be talking about why I think BitMine Immersion Technology, BMNR, has a large upside and has obviously potential to even outperform ETH in this upcoming, Q4 rally, and for various different reasons, but primarily because it is an ETH levered bet, which means, if ETH is able to do multiples, which it has been able to these past couple months since April, BMNR is essentially expected to outperform or to provide you just higher upside. And with that being said, since it is a levered bet, the risks are very apparent, and I feel like they should be addressed, you know what I mean? Because it works both ways, whereas the downside can be enhanced as well. And we saw that more recently, these past couple weeks, as BMNR was going down from, I believe, $60 a share to the high 40s over the weekend and this past week. And it's now kind of stabilizing, I should say, at around the $50 mark, which is where I actually have got in a position at around that range. I really do think that BMNR has a lot of upside potential and should be considered a high conviction play. That is, if you can stomach the associated volatility with the stock itself. So first off, we're going to be talking about Tom Lee's reputation in general. So he actually was a co-founder of Fundstrat, and before that, he is pretty much had a strong reputation in the crypto world as well as Wall Street for numerous decades now. So I do think that BMNR is actually a very high conviction play going into the Q4 of this year, and even potentially in this next year, as I think that ETH will continue to see large upside, you know what I mean? And if you're bullish on the entire landscape of crypto right now, then I think you can understand why, you know, Wall Street is kind of converging on to ETH because of its staking capabilities, because of the stable coin issuance that is essentially on the Ethereum blockchain. But first off, I want to start off just talking about Tom Lee's sort of reputation in the space. So he's primarily known for being the co-founder of Fundstrat, and he has had a very strong reputation in the crypto world as well as Wall Street for numerous decades now. And I think that this plays into his credibility, and, you know, just as Bitcoin is saw, you know, a speaker, a leader, I should say, you know, kind of educating people of the benefits of Bitcoin, we sort of have that same figure now for Ethereum. And I think that's he has pretty much been known for being somewhat of a perma bull in a more macro sense, but under his leadership, BitMine has essentially pivoted from being a mining infrastructure identity to now being an Ethereum treasury. And essentially what that means is the company's primary goal is to try and increase the amount of Ethereum that is associated with each share of the company. And in doing so, they're able to essentially mirror Michael Saylor's Bitcoin treasury ethos, which means using public capital, being able to raise funds and deploy aggressively into the underlying asset. But the only difference here is that Tom Lee is targeting Ethereum instead of Bitcoin. And I think he sees a different use case for Ethereum specifically, in that it has these staking capabilities. You know, every transaction that is made in the Ethereum ecosystem is helping to essentially verify and validate the network, you know what I mean? And if you are bullish on stable coins as well, I think that Ethereum is a no-brainer. You know, it pretty much ran up from the 1400 range to now sitting at over 4,000 and having much higher targets towards the end of the year. I will preface though that I personally do not own any Ethereum as of right now. I've kind of used BMNR to have that sort of exposure to Ethereum in the first place. And I pretty much feel like I missed the boat. I kind of faded ETH back in April, just to preface, even though I knew that it was going to have sort of this V-shaped recovery because it's been lagging for the past, this whole entire cycle. But essentially the core of this bet is to increase the ETH per share. And so BMNR is essentially not trying to mask its exposure, but rather increase its ETH reserves so that every share effectively owns a piece of a massive and increasingly growing Ethereum stake. What that is that's pure ETH leverage exposure. So if ETH goes up 2 to 3x, which we've seen it do in this cycle, you know what I mean? Like I just mentioned, pretty much 1,500 to 4,500 in a few months, you know what I mean? BMNR is expected to dramatically outperform. It has less dilution and more capital leverage in doing so. And I think that it's not just another ETH proxy, but with balance sheet leverage, they pretty much do so with having a clear balance sheet, zero debt, optional yield, as well as upside optionality baked into this strategy. And so I have it pulled up right here on my notes. So as of September 28th, BMNR reported having over 2.6 million ETH, as well as a fair share of Bitcoin, which is roughly 200 Bitcoin, and a decent amount of cash on their balance sheet as well. So as of today, BMNR is pretty clearly the number one ETH Treasury. Second being, I believe, SharpLink Gaming, which if you guys want me to make a video on that, I definitely will. I've definitely kind of done a little research and tried to compare the two. I would say that SharpLink Gaming personally is probably a little bit more of a riskier bet. They don't have as much ETH on their balance sheet, and just the fact that BMNR is leading in this space gives them that sort of first mover's advantage and that upside potential. So BMNR was actually kind of backed by some important figures in the space. Peter Thiel being one of them, behind Palantir. Kathy Wood, I believe, as well, from ARK Invest. And I honestly originally found out about Tom Lee from him pretty much shilling Bitcoin on CNBC and him just advocating for the crypto space. And then later on, kind of his thesis on the Wall Street convergence on the Ethereum network, because Ethereum has these staking capabilities. They have the smart contracts, and they have stable coins backed on the Ethereum network. I believe in June, I would have to double check this and pull this up. Actually, let me see. I think BMNR went all the way up from around $4 to $160 in roughly, I want to say like 5 weeks or so. So pretty much a 40x in that time span of ETH, pretty much rallying. So even just as of this week, this past week, I should say, I believe they pretty much accumulated over 250,000 Ethereum, and essentially the value of that, the total Ethereum that they hold, is now roughly $12 billion. You know what I mean? And so this is essentially a company that has gone from a market cap of less than $1 billion. I don't exactly know how much, but I want to say maybe a few $100 million to start off a few months back to now 12 billion. And the price action of the stock itself has followed, and we've seen this large uptick in price from the $4 to the 160, and then a sharp retracement back down to like $30 or so, and it rallies back up to like $70, $60, $70, ebbs and flows, and it's now currently like stabilizing around the $50 mark, which I, in my opinion, consider to be a bargain. And so that's essentially, if it's sitting at $50 roughly right now, all-time high is $160. That's essentially a 3x from its all-time high. So nextly, we're going to talk about the net asset value, which plays a central role in the valuation story. So because BMNR is defined by the underlying asset, which is Ethereum, as well as its cash assets, the NAV gives it a tangible floor, or at least a benchmark. So as of today, I'm looking at BMNR.rocks, and their NAV per share is roughly $37.86. So, which means there's essentially, and the price of the share is at $52 right now. So their MNAV is sitting at 1.38x as of right now. And I believe this NAV was trading at maybe even far higher previously. Like maybe, so just as a preface, essentially what NAV is the net asset value, which is the total market value of a fund's assets minus its liabilities divided by the outstanding shares. And this essentially provides a per share basis, or it can provide a per share basis. And essentially, as the NAV goes up, you would expect the price to increase as well. The faster, the quicker that BMNR is able to accumulate Ethereum, the faster that their NAV will be able to accelerate as well. So the MNAV is essentially designed to show how much of a premium or discount the market is placing on a company's crypto holdings. So an MNAV generally greater than 1 suggests that the market is assigning a premium to the company's crypto assets, possibly due to the perceived skill of management. Or the BMNR is actually also one of the largest publicly traded stocks in the world as of right now. I believe it sits just under the top 25, and if essentially Tom Lee is betting on an Ethereum super cycle because of the Wall Street convergence, as well as regulatory frameworks. I kind of want to get a little bold. So if Ethereum cycles into this kind of super cycle that Tom Lee is forecasting, with the large capital inflows, BMNR being one of the largest volume publicly traded stocks in the world as of right now, I believe sitting just under the top 25, as well as the institutional adoption, DeFi expansion, stablecoin growth, then BMNR, I believe, is perfectly positioned to ride the upside asymmetry. So with ETH at a $10,000 to $15,000 valuation, which is Tom Lee's target, I think that in this case, BMNR's share price could compound at multiples of ETH's run, because of the leverage and their essentially their goal is to, once they reach the 5% target of all of the ETH supply, they want to begin staking it. And I think at the current valuations of how much Ethereum they hold, they would be essentially generating roughly $300 million in just pure revenue, based on the annual staking capabilities from their holdings. And that would essentially make them one of the most profitable companies, publicly traded companies in the world. Being said, of course, any bullish bet that you are placing, or anything with an asymmetric upside potential, obviously you have to take into account the risks. And because BMNR is so heavily exposed to ETH, any crash in Ethereum will be magnified in the BMNR stock price. So dilution is real, and the company has done private placements to fund the Ethereum buys. And this can overall sink the returns if it is overdone. So with that being said, so as of today, they currently hold 2.65 million Ethereum, and the 5% of the total supply of Ethereum is about 6 million ETH. And BMNR currently has an average ETH buy price of roughly $4,100, with their ETH per 1,000 shares being 8.63, and both of these numbers have just been increasing over time, as well as they hold roughly $440 million US dollars on their balance sheet. So with that being said, I think that the risk to reward is compelling, And for these reasons that I've stated, I am going to be trying to position myself accordingly, and hopefully increase my position size a decent amount by the end of by the end of these next couple months, so that I'm prepared for the Q4 that is coming up, as well as ETH perhaps outperforming Bitcoin in this last period of the year.